time about this central
Yeah.
problem, and they were just completely head in the sand about it.
Yeah, there was. I mean, there is enough real. There's enough real discourse surrounding Joe Biden's, or there was enough real discourse surrounding Joe Biden's like mental faculties. Sound off so I can see if your audio I can hear you or not.
Yeah, can you hear me? One, two,
Oh,
three, four,
perfect.
five.
Okay, you are not a boomer at all, man. I don't know why you said that, because like
I was worried. I mean, I had to download Discord for this. That's how out of touch I am with this.
no. Discord is weird. Don't worry about it. But thank you so much for coming on. You have been this is a bit of a I told you so moment for you, as well as some others, in terms of like Joe Biden being received in a certain way by like the broader electorate.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to talk to you about that. And I wanted to talk to you about like how dynamic this race has been so far, almost overnight, and how things changed. But if you want to give a little bit of your background to the people that are in this community that maybe don't read the New York Times, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I appreciate you having me on. My name is Astead. I joined the New York Times in 2018. I was at the Boston Globe before that, and I've really been someone who's been focused on trying to cover elections in different ways. You know, when I came to the Times, that was after 2016, where there was a real sense that political journalism had messed stuff up. Leading into that election, you mostly had mainstream political journalism missed the Republican primary, missed the Democratic primary and Bernie's energy, and then obviously not point people to the correct result with Trump's win in 2016. And so I was working locally at the Boston Globe as a city council reporter during that time. And I remember telling myself, like, if I am ever in these positions, I'm going to try to like include more voices, talk to different types of people, and actually reflect the way politics is being experienced on the ground rather than kind of amongst the insiders. And so when I came to the Times, that was really my job. I like covered the Democratic primary with Warren and Harris and Biden and all the others. But really from the basis perspective, I go to Trump rallies a lot and like do things about ways that that conservatism is kind of shifting on the ground. And then I started the Run Up, which is the Times Politics podcast in 2022, which was really trying to take that stuff in audio form.
We call it hogwash here, by the way. Just sorry to cut you off, but it's my favorite thing to do. At least is like I love watching Republicans. I mean, we call it hogwash. You don't have to obviously do that, but like they are very interesting and fun to observe and even interact with. Personally, I love that. I like that.
Like I was always like, I didn't want to just be in one type of place. So like I make sure that we went to a Jason Aldean concert 6 months ago to ask people about his song, Try That in a Small Town, that was like blowing up on the Republican side.
Oh yeah.
Like I try to go to rallies, I try to go to like places where people are, and that includes D and R. And so that's what we tried to do in the podcast. That's what led us to all of this age stuff.
Yeah. So by your estimation, do you feel like the Republicans were the only people, for the most part, talking about like Biden's like cognitive abilities diminishing in terms of like coverage from other aspects of like other places in mainstream media, with the exception of like Fox News, obviously?
Right. I mean, like you saw Republicans driving that storyline definitely for the last 3-4 years. So much so that a lot of people ran away from it thinking, oh, this is Republican misinformation. This is them trying to brand Joe Biden as old. But the other place I heard it from was regular people. Like every time we would even talk to people about the prospect of next election, if we weren't in like a specifically Democratic or DC place, everyone would be like, well, I think Donald Trump's kind of wild, but Joe Biden's really old. And so it was really clear to us that this was the storyline to follow, because the thing that we were hearing was that like most people didn't want either candidate. And so while Democrats were acting like that was just the thing that was happening on the Republican side, I was like, well, the thing that feels like we're hearing is mutual dislike, not really just one. And so that's the reason we kept asking them those questions.
Yeah, which they kind of covered it as well, the double haters phenomena. Like I think that was how they talked about it, and it was for a multitude of different reasons. But I think like for me it got to like an unavoidable place during the uncommitted voter campaigns. Obviously, a lot of that was because of Gaza, but I think a big part of that also was Biden's age. And the fact that like the Democratic Party or Democratic Party's like base of voters was looking for a different alternative. And it was so obvious, and yet like I didn't see enough like media coverage on that either. from
Yep.
that aspect, and it was more so just like kind of brushed aside, even though the margins that we saw in especially key states for the Democratic Party's success was so significant. We're talking
Yeah.
about hundreds of thousands of voters in certain states like that voted for anybody but Biden in the primaries. And obviously, I kept trying to explain to people like the real uncommitted voters just simply don't vote. We have a plurality in almost every election
absolutely.
that doesn't vote for either party at all, that doesn't vote at all, right? That are eligible to vote. And so that, these people that are going into the Democratic primary, they are the most active base in the Democratic primary. So it's probably going to be like, obviously, maybe not 10x, but I don't know what the exact math equation would look like, but the numbers for the general are going to reflect something much, much worse than the margins that you saw in the primaries, which alone were enough for Joe Biden to lose because there were more people voting against Joe Biden in the Democratic Party's primaries than the number of voters that Joe Biden won those states on. So that should have been immediate. Like, I mean, I think that the Democratic Party should have, Joe Biden should have been the bridge candidate, and he should have perhaps maybe even had a stronger vice president, or, even with Kamala Harris, in my opinion, shouldn't have made her do side missions that were genuinely unfavorable, like sending her to Guatemala to be like, don't come to America.
It speaks to how much they weren't seeing this scenario play out. Like I did a big story on her, and I can say that like for the White House, they were not working under the assumption that she would be the natural heir. And if they were, they would have done stuff differently. Harris did not want that assignment of Guatemala, of the root cause on the border. Joe Biden made her take it.
Yeah.
And then partially, like, that was some of the uncomfort. But it speaks to your point about the age denialism overall. Like, they could not set her up differently, partially because they weren't really acknowledging the biggest problem that they had, which is that when most Americans saw them, they didn't think that would be a kind of 8-year option. And it's really crazy to me because, like, having been there in 2020, like, age was a huge part of people's concerns about Joe Biden from the start. It was part of the reason candidates like Pete had a moment, or even Klobuchar had a moment in New Hampshire, Warren and all of those type of people.
Castro was one of the first people.
All of that stuff was so litigated at the time. For them to act like, oh, he's gotten 4 years older, but no one cares anymore, was always really crazy to me. And it's a denial of like our whole ecosystem. Like, there's a thing that happens in political journalism where people act. This happened. I think the best example is after the debate. People are like, "Oh, the debate was a bad moment, but he hasn't had a big gaffe since." But meanwhile, a lot of people saw that video of him talking to the wrong woman, and it's somewhat looking like his wife, and not. Like, people see all of these kind of like mini viral clips of him walking up the stairs and like looking rough doing it. I'm like, people have been reminded even in this time about this central problem, and they were just completely head in the sand about it.
Yeah, there is enough real discourse surrounding Joe Biden's, or there was enough real discourse surrounding Joe Biden's like mental faculties that even like fake stuff would get play and it would just pile on. And I don't think like anybody addressed that at all, like, or anybody in the campaign side was like even looking at that. And it also seemed like they were just allergic to looking at polls at all, until the very last moment. And I found it rather funny because it was very Trump